Angry Americans around the country and around the globe. It is a very important time for all of us. And we've got a very important guest, a guy I've known for a long time that I've been looking for an opportunity to bring onto this show. And there's nobody who I can think of who's more of a man of the moment. Every guest I bring is important, inspiring, and iconic. This guy is becoming the latter and is definitely the first two. I am very, very pleased and thankful to have joining us on this episode, the great and powerful Jake Wood.
Hey, how you doing, Paul?
You like that, man?
That was a lot. That was a lot.
Well,
but I appreciate the kind words.
It is worthwhile, and it is justified. First off, thank you for taking the time. You are more than almost anybody I know, deep in the fight right now, on the front lines of what I think is a war against the coronavirus. But you're a guy who's seen many different kinds of war, many different kinds of adversity. But on a very basic level, I want to thank you for doing it. I want to thank you for taking the time away from your troops and to be here with us, and just ask you, how you doing, man? How you doing right now, being at the tip of the spear and in the middle of all this?
Yeah, I'm holding up well. It's interesting. This is so unprecedented, obviously for everyone. It's unprecedented, for the country, for most companies. It's certainly unprecedented for ours. And even though our entire organization is built around responding to disasters, and it's what I've been doing for over a decade, this is just different. Trying to manage a disaster. You mentioned, taking some time away from the troops on the front lines. Well, I haven't left my house in 3 weeks. I've never been in a leadership position where I haven't been able to walk up to, the folks that are in my organization and put my hand on their shoulder and tell them good job, or to see the work, firsthand. So it's been interesting. But it's also been, it's been inspiring. We have seen people jump into this in ways that I don't think we ever imagined, our organization, could pivot in that way. So it's been interesting, man, to say the least.
Yeah,
It's
right?
been interesting, but we're doing well and the family's safe. So, for the time being, we're just grateful that our family hasn't been impacted, and our hearts just go out to people who have.
Well, my best to your amazing wife and daughter, and to see you, you lean into everything you do, and leaning into fatherhood seems really natural for you. And it's been inspiring to watch and to see you grow as a dad and as a leader. You kept telling me for a long time I had to get into the dad business, man. I trailed after you by a couple of years, but you were right. It changes everything immediately. That's been, she's 18 months old now, and everything you told me that would happen has happened. So I should have taken your advice earlier. Well, I got the same advice from others, so I was just happy to pass it down. And a lot of us, frankly, who've been, overseas in deployment and then deep in the fight, a lot of us had families later. Right. We kind of put that on the back burner and had kids later. So yeah. I'm just happy that you and your amazing wife are making more people who can join all the good fights that you're a part of. But every dad needs a break. Every mom needs a break. So I got to ask you, what is your adult beverage of choice, Jake Wood?
Yeah, it's interesting. You find yourself working from home. You got a lot of idle hours, even in the midst of a pandemic. So I've been reaching for my beverage of choice more frequently than I probably should be, but I'm a sucker for a good session IPA. I'm a big beer drinker. I'm not a beer snob, but I'm a beer drinker. And then I like a good craft bourbon. Been drinking a lot of Michter's lately, which I've been enjoying, and Costco was even running a special on Johnny Walker Blue Label. So I don't often drink scotch, but when you see a great price on something like that, you gotta treat yourself, I guess.
There you go. I love it. Well, I mean, you were at one point a gigantic offensive lineman. For folks who don't know, you're a pretty big dude, but now you look almost like a movie star. You got, some cool facial hair and gray hair. You look very.
The wife hates the beard. I grow a weak beard too, and she just hates it. So now it's just a game of, who's going to give in first between. It's
kind of a Johnny Depp beard you got going on.
Yeah, there. I know. It's like when you're overseas in Iraq or Afghanistan and you grow your mustache out for the first time and you see those guys struggling through their first mustache. That's what this beard is to me.
But you used to be an offensive lineman. At one point, weren't you like at or above 300 pounds?
Yeah, so I played O-line at Wisconsin, and most people are surprised to learn. I was actually, if you can believe it, I was undersized for a Wisconsin offensive tackle at 290 pounds.
Wow.
So yes, a mountain of a human being. They wanted me at 315. I spent 1 week over 300 pounds, and I just couldn't sustain it. So I usually played around 290.
So that's where all that beer comes in handy, right? The beer helps
Yeah,
you pack on the pounds.
yeah. It's a steady diet of beer and mac and cheese when you're up there in Madison.
Well, you're burning calories like a mofo now because you guys are on the front line. But I asked this of every guest as well. You were growing up in Wisconsin before you ended up on this trajectory where you played D1 football. You end up in the Marine Corps, and now you're leading the fight, really not just for the country, for the globe. But I want to go way back in the way back machine and ask you, Jake Wood, what was your first car?
My first car was a 1987 two-door Chevy Blazer, two-tone. I don't think it was two-tone rolling off the factory line. I think it was two-tone because the bottom had rusted out at some point prior to me buying it. So, that was how the fab shop repainted it. But I loved that car. I ended up getting into a car crash in it on my way to the high school once and put my face through the windshield, which is, that's how you get a face like this, Paul. And I was an idiot. I'm always religious about wearing my seatbelt. This is, honest to God, the one time I can ever recall in my life I didn't wear my seatbelt. And some idiot tried to pull in front of me, and I T-boned him, and put my head through the windshield. And that was the end of that car.
Wow. What color was the two-tone? It was rust on the bottom and something else on top?
Red on top, black on bottom.
Wow.
Great. I loved it, man.
That's stylish, man. And how bad did you get hurt when your face hit the windshield?
It was, I got taken to the ER. I lost consciousness for a little bit, not long, but, it happened in a neighborhood where a bunch of my high school friends lived. So they actually heard the crash, ran outside, pulled me out of the car, which maybe wasn't advisable. I don't know. And then, I got carted off into the ambulance. It was a scene.
So maybe that sets you up for the life you're on now, right? Where you are at the scene of crisis. You're the helper. Like we talk a lot in this show about Mr. Rogers, and we say, look for the helpers. And ever since I met you, you've been a helper. The first time we met, I think, was during the snowpocalypse, during Storm the Hill. I think it was 2010?
2010.
It was the year, it was right the week and the year that the Saints won the Super Bowl.
Yep.
And our mutual friend, the great Clay Hunt, was there for Storm the Hill. And you were a late addition.
Yep.
We used to always say that, like, we loved Clay so much that we let him bring Jake.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I was his plus one.
You were his plus one. And we all bonded in the suck there. It was snowpocalypse. We were advocating for veterans. We had vets from all over the country, many of whom are now involved with Team Rubicon in their communities. But in that week or so we were together, there were 2 blizzards. We were trapped in a shitty DC hotel. It kind of felt like The Shining, but we were all bonding. And you had this idea for Team Rubicon. It was just coming together. You guys had just got back from Haiti. And that was part of it, was that Clay said to me, we just got back from Haiti. This guy's amazing. You got to get him on the team. And I remember you showing me the sketch of the Team Rubicon logo, I think on a napkin or something. You told me your sister had made it, I think.
Yeah.
But can you tell, for folks who are new to this, can you tell the origin story of Team Rubicon and how it's led you to be built for this moment?
Yeah. I mean, it's a long story. I'll try to make it brief. You mentioned it. After Wisconsin, I went to the Marine Corps. I served 4 years, from 2005 to 2009. And in that time, I served with a guy named Clay Hunt, who I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. We both knew well. Clay and I were really close. So I got out of the Marine Corps a couple months after Clay, late 2009. And 60 days after my EAS, I'm sitting around waiting for these grad school applications to come back, and the Haiti earthquake happened. And I sit there, I don't have a job because I'm hoping to go to grad school in the fall, and I'm going to kind of take some time and bum around for the next couple of months. And as I'm watching the earthquake unfold, I just feel the urge to go down, and like any 25-year-old Marine Corps veteran would. And so I called Clay and I said, Clay, you want to go to Haiti with me? And I swear to God, he said, yeah, like, sure, I've got school, but yeah, I mean, I can take a week, but why Haiti? Let's go to a nice Caribbean island. Let's go to Jamaica or the Dominican Republic or something. And he hadn't turned on the news and didn't know about the earthquake. So I filled him in. He actually could not go because that weekend he had one of his family members was getting married. So, I ended up getting a group of guys together, and we went down to Haiti just a couple days after the earthquake. And we started doing all this stuff. We crossed the border from the Dominican Republic. It was 8 of us originally, and then we were doing mostly medical work. We had a special forces doctor with us. We had 2 emergency room physicians, a couple of firefighter EMTs. I had, medical training, I say that with kind of air quotes on it, like just like any Marine infantryman had medical training. And, for 20 days, Team Rubicon was down there. That's what we called our small team. And it just kept growing and growing and growing. And we realized that all we were doing was, repurposing what we'd been taught in the Marine Corps and in the Army and, the other branches of service to help people in those moments. And so we came back, right before I met you, and, cocksure and full of, confidence, and said that we were going to build the best disaster response organization in the world. Had no idea what that meant. But I think we were foolish enough to try. So we set out to do it. And, it's been an interesting journey. That was a decade ago. The organization has about 120,000 registered volunteers today. In any given year, about 20 to 25,000 of those will be active in some capacity, responding to disasters, training for disasters, running mitigation projects in communities to help stave off the impact of disasters. And it's been really remarkable to see. We've had our bumps and bruises along the way as entrepreneurs, and like any startup. But it's been really incredible just to see the idea take shape. This idea that we as taxpayers spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year training our men and women to fight. We give them incredible skill sets. They gain this unbelievable experience overseas, and then when they come back, we don't ask anything of them anymore. And I know you've been on the front lines of that fight. We don't even do simple things like credential them, with civilian opportunities when they get out. I mean, it's just, there's so many absurdities in that process, but we tried to tap into one of them. And so, yeah, I mean, you fast forward to the present day, we do all sorts of disasters. We've responded to everything from hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, wildfires. We have responded to infectious disease outbreaks before, even as recently as last year. But I don't know that we ever thought that we would be, facing the situation we do today with COVID-19. It is, from an emergency management perspective, it is so unprecedented. It is, the chaos of 9/11, it's tenfold that, just because of its breadth and depth across all systems of, government, the economy, the healthcare system. It's just, nobody, from the administrator of FEMA down through me, down to, a local community emergency response team, really could have anticipated what this has happened. But like I said, we've had 120,000 volunteers, and early in this crisis, we started tracking it when it was coming through China. We have a planning section at our National Operations Center in Dallas, and this is what they do. They monitor situations around the globe for crises unfolding, and we spin into action when opportunities arise. So when this thing was in China, we will never be able to operate in China as a disaster response organization by nature of being former U.S. military veterans, right? So
right?
We've tried before. They've had earthquakes. We've tried to work through the embassies to get access. It'll never happen. So we knew we weren't going to respond to coronavirus in Wuhan, but we knew it was going to jump the borders. But we thought it would probably be kind of relegated to Asia, Southeast Asia. There'd be some, it would of course get passed in, around the globe just because of, how global a country China is, but we never anticipated it becoming this pandemic. So we were watching it thinking we might deploy our medical teams to Thailand or Vietnam or something like that. And then all of a sudden, as you know, it just spread like a prairie fire. And so we started positioning Team Rubicon very early to pivot everything we do into the fight, put all of our medical providers on alert, activated basically all of our volunteer leaders in all of our cities across the country, and kind of braced for it. And been in the fight since nearly day one. I mean, I know you're at ground zero there in New York. I'm in LA, which we've kind of been bracing for it for the last month, and it hasn't really hit here yet. I think we were good at taking some early measures and learning from the mistakes that New York made, but we're not through it yet.
And you guys, I'd love for you to go a step deeper, because I think, I saw you here in the tri-state area after Hurricane Sandy, and I've seen you on small tornadoes, floods, everything all across the country. And we share, a mentor and friend in General Petraeus. And I remember as the organization was growing, I said, man, are they going to have enough? Are they going to have enough veterans? And early on, he said, I don't know if we're going to have enough disasters. And now it's flipped, right? And there's so many disasters. There's so many things you guys could respond to, and you continue to respond over and over again. And for folks who don't understand, these are folks often who volunteer with Team Rubicon, who have civilian jobs or are students, and they go on deployments, right? It can be for a week or a couple of months, right? So I would love for you to maybe give us an example of one of your volunteers. And then also, if you can shape the battlefield as you see it. I know you're in over 70 locations now around the country, and you're doing medical testing, as I understand, for the first time around COVID-19. So give us a personal example of what your people are like, because I think that's a tremendous source of inspiration and hope right now. You've said before, you're there for people on their worst days. And the Team Rubicon gray shirts come walking through the door, and it's like an angel coming through the door is the way people describe it. But give us an example of one of your frontline leaders. And then if you can, shape what your current response looks like on the battlefield.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to even just pinpoint what's the archetype for a Team Rubicon volunteer, because it's amazing how diverse the group is. I mean, in particularly from almost, from a socioeconomic perspective, we've got volunteers who are, we've got a guy named Todd in the New Jersey area, Coast Guard veteran, who, is a senior marketing executive at numerous startups that have been acquired. The guy just crushes it at life, but there's something missing. And so he donates over the years. I mean, he's donated thousands and thousands of hours just in an administrative capacity, helping us to organize volunteers, organize events, organize training. Then we have volunteers who, are struggling with being underemployed. We have volunteers who were medically discharged, medically retired from the military, who, maybe haven't found work since leaving the Army or the Marine Corps, but who still are looking for a way to be of value to society. I mean, the military said, you no longer are of value to us. Here's a monthly paycheck. Good luck with life. That doesn't really sit well with a lot of these folks. So it's just, it's such a diverse group of people. And when they get together, it's so crazy, because you'll have this liberal, New Englander sleeping on a cot next to, the deepest crimson red state, vet, and politics doesn't enter the equation. They might talk about it, but they don't get mad about it. They agree to disagree. The only thing that matters is that they are there to help people. It's cliche, but it's just like a platoon. So, we activated them for COVID-19, and we didn't really have a playbook for this, right? We had a medical capability that we deploy internationally. We've really never deployed it in the continental US. We deployed medical teams to Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. That was the closest we'd ever been to doing something medically here in the US. But we just launched a 250-bed hospital in Santa Clara, California, that's already seeing patients. It's a federal medical station. We're on the verge of launching another federal medical station in Navajo Nation in Arizona. One of the most vulnerable populations in the U.S. Our tribal lands are always forgotten, always left behind in circumstances like this. We're running a mobile testing site with a healthcare system in North Carolina. That mission will probably continue to expand. And then, we're running operations and logistics in partnership with groups like Feeding America and Meals on Wheels for, at last count, I think over 60 major food banks and food bank networks all across the US. One of the things we saw early was that, food banks, which we've never done anything with food or food security in the past, they rely a lot on volunteers, but their volunteer demographic is the age 65 and over. And so because of their risk profile relative to COVID-19, they're not coming out. And so these food bank operations are just shutting down. So we've kind of stepped into that void, built kind of some hasty playbooks for how we do that. And then, the other element that we're engaging in is, what we've really developed over the last decade is an expertise for bringing order to chaos. We have systems and process. We operate on the incident command system, and any firefighter or EMS person that's listening to the show knows exactly what ICS is. As a nonprofit, we've become experts in that. And so,
can you explain that, Jake? Can you explain what the ICS is for people who are less familiar to it and why?
So I know you were on the ground after 9/11, like on the ground at ground zero. If you can imagine that when 9/11 happened, all these agencies responded. The FBI, the military, the New York Police Department, the New York Fire Department, like the EPA, was there because of the environmental concerns. And none of them operated on the same emergency kind of command system. They all used different protocols. They didn't even, they had no interoperability. So it was just
different radios, like different
radio frequencies. Right. Yeah. So ICS was one of the first things that the new Department of Homeland Security, which was formed after 9/11, they implemented nationwide. And they kind of pulled it from the wildland firefighting system in California. So it had already been in place since I think the 70s. The California wildland firefighting system just operates like a just really, really smooth. And so they pulled that up, made some tweaks, and they implemented it. Any federal, state, or local agency has to be compliant in it. Nonprofits like Team Rubicon don't, but in the military, interoperability is the key. Like NATO works because I can call for fire from a French, fighter plane just as easily as a U.S. one. So, that's how we wanted to design it. And what's interesting, if you think about it, practice kind of makes perfect in a situation like this. And so if you're a county level emergency manager, particularly in a small county, you could go a 20-year career and never see a disaster. Now you'll use ICS for like the annual Thanksgiving Day parade, right, but you'll never actually implement it in the chaos of this type of situation. Last year, we responded to 100 disasters, right? Last year alone. So we have this cadre of emergency managers who have this breadth and depth of experience that is almost unparalleled across the country. So one of the biggest requests that we're getting right now is for our top volunteer leaders to deploy into emergency operations centers just to basically advise and assist them in how they're managing the operations of this response.
So, Jake, I want to pull all the way back and look at the national response, because you are, an evolution of, I don't know, like the old days before there were real fire departments, when people used to like come together and pass buckets to put out fires, right? Like you guys are the evolution of almost like the volunteer firefighter spirit in America. But now, you're more effective in some ways than the Red Cross, right? You guys are kind of like the next generation of something like the Red Cross. Maybe I'm categorizing it wrong, but I really think people look to you to be, as a social entrepreneur, you are really pushing the boundaries of what a nonprofit can be, what an American-based nonprofit can be. Now there's Team Rubicon Global, which is an expansion of your idea on a global level. But I want you to pull it down, because people think disaster in the U.S., they think FEMA. Right. And I hope that whoever is president, come next year, that you're at the top of their short list for director of FEMA. I don't know if there's anybody that's better qualified. I've talked to you, but I know you're shaking your head. But, anybody who's elected president would be smart to pull you in and listen to you, because you know what the hell you're doing. But can you evaluate the current response system? why does it work? Why does it not work? And FEMA in particular, unless you feel like there's a more front line. Now we know the Department of Defense will be a lead element. The VA will be a lead element. Local hospitals will be a lead element. But can you kind of assess the national response? And if you were advising the president, what would you tell him to do?
Yeah, I mean, what we're really seeing right now is the limitations of a federalist system, right? And disasters inherently are states' issues. So, you know, the concept that FEMA is this this silver bullet that can come in and solve these problems, it's kind of it's the wrong perspective to have. You know, states, the way the system is designed is that states are responsible for their citizens. They typically engage in mutual aid agreements with neighboring states so they can have cross-border support when that makes sense. And FEMA really only steps in extreme circumstances within a very narrow scope. They are there to move money and in some cases provide advisory services. FEMA was never designed, nor is it staffed and resourced to be able to provide, you know, what is necessary today. And frankly, like you can't really design a system to handle what's happening today. I mean, right. you know how floods they're categorized as like 1,000-year events or 500-year events. You can't really design a system to fully withstand what would be a 1,000-year flood. It's impractical. You can take steps against it, but you know the flood insurance program that FEMA operates, it only operates against a 100-year flood scenario, right? This pandemic is I don't know. I guess you can look at the Spanish flu in 1918 and say, well, that was 100 years ago. So maybe it's a 100-year event, but it's really hard to say. And I don't know that you design a system for this. That being said, what's needed? We need to, you know, the call to federalize the acquisition process early was a major miss by the federal government to not implement. I mean, the fact that we have states today competing against one another and competing against their own federal government on bids for critical life-saving equipment is just, I mean, it's absurd on its face. And there were, you know, steps that they could take to immediately, you know, put an end to that. And the result is not only are we paying more for supplies than we should be, but there are delays in that process. And it's creating, you know, this element of us versus them when we should all be on one team, right? Yeah. We're artificially creating this division in this competition when, you know, we shouldn't be. And what you're seeing now is this incredible, I don't know what the right word is, collaboration or thoughtfulness, where you're seeing states like Washington, who may have already peaked and borne the brunt of it, shipping their ventilators to New York State. I mean, imagine being a governor, being responsible for your own constituents there in the state of Washington. You don't know that it's over yet. You think it is, and you suspect you have an excess capacity of ventilation equipment. And you have the choice. Do I ship 400 or do I keep them here just in case I need them? And if I ship them and I do end up needing them, and even one of my citizens dies as a result of that decision, did I do the right thing or did I let my people down? But what you're seeing is people are rising to this with the mentality of, no, we're all Americans. It's not Washington versus New York. This is a whole of America response. We have to act that way.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of framing it up. It's almost like, you know, Jake, you and I think maybe we're in Iraq at the same time, but it would be like if I was in the Army and you were in the Marine Corps and we were fighting over ammunition.
Well, there was never a competition over ammunition. You guys had it, we didn't.
We also had the brains and you guys didn't.
Well, you had everything.
No. But I imagine that, right? Imagine the 82nd Airborne and you know, 1st Marine Division are competing for ammunition, right? For rounds for our M4s and M16s as we're engaging in Fallujah or someplace like that, right? It's absurd. And I think what you're seeing from those governors is that teamwork, that idea that, you know what, New York needs it now, but I know if the wave shifts back, New York's going to help me later, right? And I give the governors a lot of credit in that regard. But I've also heard you know, you guys are operating in California right now. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Like, I'm going to pause because I want folks who are not in a place like New York to understand that sirens are going by. I'm recording in my house. Sirens are going by constantly. Like just since we've been talking, I think 3 sirens have gone by my house just to give people a sense of the pace. And I think it really does, feel a bit like a combat environment. Every time you leave your house, it's like leaving the wire. People who are frontline workers like Dr. Paul Hazer that I spoke to in the last episode, and now you're a frontline person. But I heard you talk about the restrictions in California. And it feels like one of the biggest enemies for you guys is the bureaucracy, right? Being able to get in the fight, right? Being like things like authorization or certification, barriers that maybe made sense at some point, maybe didn't, but now have to be busted open because it's extreme times. But I ask you, maybe to break that down, but more importantly, I want to ask you the same question I ask of all our guests. Jake Wood, what makes you angry?
Oh boy, a lot of things these days. First thing that jumps to my mind is apathy. This sense in some parts of the country that you're getting, which is, this isn't my problem. Even just when people early on were saying, well, I'm young, I'm not at risk, so I'm going to go out, not having, even when they were fully aware that they could become, a threat vector, carrying the virus, transmitting to other people who were at risk, but unable to put the needs of the whole above themselves. And, if you've been in the disaster business long enough, like I have, you see apathy frequently, and it's good because you also get to see, the opposite. You see amazing, empathetic leaders and citizens doing the right thing regardless of personal cost. I think that the other thing that's making me angry right now is indecision. We've seen it we've seen it at the federal level. We've seen it in numerous states. We've seen it, at a county level. Us personally, Team Rubicon, we are running into kind of the, indecision, call it bureaucracy in some regards. Like we've run into the buzzsaw of bureaucracy in so many situations where people are allowing very simple problems to stand in the way of very critical and large scale solutions, right? Some examples, like, we were establishing a facility. I'm not going to call out specific, officials or counties or cities, but we were setting up a location at the request of HHS, and we put 33 medical providers against it. And these are people that are in short supply. Like New York City could use those 33 medical providers right about now. I know you know that. And for 96 hours, every 12 hours, it was something else that, as this facility was standing by, ready to accept patients, they were finding reasons not to accept patients. Oh, an argument about who was going to pay for it, the county or the city. Who gives a shit? Like, we will figure that out on the back end. And I promise you that we're going to come to the right decision on the backside of this. Who is going to have the county would not let the fire department refused to serve as fire watch for the facility, for the county. And we're like, we just had a 12-hour delay for this. We're freaking vets. If there's one thing we know how to do, it's stand fucking fire watch, right? Like, give me a glow belt and a moonbeam and I got it, And it was seriously like that single thing, as simple as that, which is important. Like, you want to be safe, you want to be up to code, but clean, neat solutions and rules and bureaucracy. Like, I said it on a news program recently, like, those are made for peacetime. And if we want to use the analogy that this is a wartime environment, some people get upset about using that analogy. I don't, right? This is chaos. Lives are on the line. You have the fog of war. Rules are made for peacetime. You have to use a different playbook in this situation. You have to do what's right, regardless of what the rules say. And I think history is going to look back on leaders in this situation, and they're not going to judge kindly the people who played by the rules, because that's going to mean that led to lives being lost.
How do you get that cough in there? But thank you for breaking that down. Let me ask you another point here, Jake. I mean, you have also you are, I think, the epitome of a social entrepreneur, because you're solving problems, but you're doing it at scale. And, I learned from Bill Drayton and Ashoka and others that social entrepreneurs are people who build solutions to the world's problems, right? If you were a tech entrepreneur, you'd be, hiding out on your island in Bali right now with a bunch of luxury cars. But you're in the nonprofit space where your reward for success is more work, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're never going to get your stock options and cash out.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, you have been extremely successful in two areas that I want to ask you to talk about. One is building an organization which required fundraising and required
Mm-hmm.
operations and execution. And on a parallel track, the technology component. You're
Yeah.
almost a technology company in the
Yeah.
way you network these volunteers and the way you built platforms. You know, your everything you do online is fantastic. Even, you know, your photographs, the engagement, the way you allow people to be a part of your mission, I think is probably underappreciated. It's not this that you guys are tough. You're also smart. And that is, I think, one of the best representations of our generation of veterans. You are improvising, adapting, overcoming, but at scale in a way that I don't know if a nonprofit's grown as fast as you have over the last couple of years. And I see you doing partnerships with Major League Baseball and musicians and at the same time understanding the genius of marketing, right? The gray shirts. You guys are called the gray shirts. That's you guys. Now they know that if they see the gray shirts coming over the hill, that's Team Rubicon. So can you talk about your vision and your lessons learned as an entrepreneur in building, I don't want to call it a business, you know, a social impact machine?
Yeah. I mean, it's a broad question. I think I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always had that itch. I was doing entrepreneurial things growing up. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I wanted to get into that entrepreneur scene, that we call it the tech scene. But I was a sniper, right? I always joke, like, it's not like I was going to go walk up to, Twitter's front door and be like, hey, you should totally hire me. I got this amazing skill set. No, I mean, obviously I knew I had something to offer, but it just didn't translate. So the fun thing about TR is that it's been able to scratch that itch. And, I think most people have this really antiquated perspective of what a nonprofit is. And we call it like your grandma's nonprofit. They think of all these other charities that are out there and, they're outdated. They don't rely on tech well. They're not innovative. They're not edgy. They're not pushing the envelope. They're just kind of existing. And they're doing good work, but they just kind of exist. They persist, right? And I was never going to be satisfied doing that. If that was going to be the tact that we were going to take with Team Rubicon, then I was just going to kind of ascend onto the board of directors, let somebody else run it. And I was going to go scratch that entrepreneurial itch somewhere else. So it's been fun. It's been a grind though, man. I know my brother, my fellow social entrepreneur, I know, the grind, those nights you lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if you're going to make payroll. Like, we've been there. It hasn't just been, success after success. The number of times that, I've had to walk in front of the team and say, hey guys, we're delaying bonuses this year. We can't make it work. Or, hey guys, like, we got to go into austerity measures. But we always had a plan and we always had a vision that we believed in. So yeah, we took an approach where we wanted to be different from the beginning. We wanted to innovate both kind of in our voice and our marketing, right? Take a bit of an edgier approach. And, I'll acknowledge that, IAVA was a leader in this space. The way you guys were able to position yourself alongside major corporate brands, like early on, we looked to the activations you were doing with Harley, the activations you were doing with Miller Coors, like, those are cool brands. And we thought to ourselves, like, why are we going to walk around with a tin cup in our hand asking for $5 at a time when we can go and do a $1 million partnership with like cool, iconic brands that add, all this other lift? And the reality is you can do both. And so that's what we've done and had some success. The technology stuff has been fun too. We really see ourselves, you kind of hit it on the head when you said we're almost a technology company. We think of ourselves as a platform company, right? So your Airbnb, your Uber. What do those companies do, right? What they've created is a marketplace that is a frictionless environment where resources that, have excess capacity or like idle resources and assets, like a car or an extra bedroom, can find a consumer that is looking for that resource, right? Before there was no marketplace for that transaction to happen. And they created that frictionless experience. Well, we think of, our resource are the latent potential of these veterans sitting around in communities who, many of them, not all, want to serve their community in some capacity. And we've created a marketplace in our, continuing to create and refine, where we can now connect them to that demand signal, communities that are, experiencing a disaster. And it's more complicated than that. It's a little bit more hands-on, but technology is such a huge component of it if you're doing it at scale.
That nails it, man. It is complicated, but there's a simplicity to it, right? You're matching, a need with a demand, and that's the brilliance of it. You're able to even recognize that you need people who can operate chainsaws to clear roads. So you train people to do that. Then you've got a pool of these people, and when there's a tornado, when there's a disaster, you can mobilize them quickly. And I think it really to call it a platform company, I think is right, and probably where you all don't get enough credit. In how you've changed the game and how you're pushing the boundaries of innovation, not just in the nonprofit sector, but private sector and across the board. You're also a company of values, and you are an outspoken leader. You're a person of integrity. You and I have talked a lot about the leadership void that often exists in Washington and other places. Can you talk about this moment in time where so many people are concerned about the president? They don't know if they can count on him. I won't ask you to go too far into it if you can't, but, can you evaluate your thoughts on how to respond to this kind of a leader, what we can do in the face of that? And then, I would love for you to comment on, you were a Marine, which some folks may know is kind of like the stepchild of the Navy. The Navy's getting ripped apart right now. The acting secretary has fired Captain Crozier. He gave I think, inappropriate speech to the crew. He may be fired by the time this episode drops. But, can you talk about the national leadership and the White House in whatever way you're able, and then what's happening in the Navy and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, in moments like this, one of the most important things that a leader can do is just speak to the brutal facts, right? And embrace them. I think, I don't think it would be a politically charged thing for me to say that our national leadership failed us in the beginning of this situation by not, just looking America in the eye and saying, listen, this is going to be bad, and we're going to need to kind of reach down and just really get through this together, right? And it's going to be painful. The economy is going to be hurt. Our healthcare systems are going to be overwhelmed. But if we rise to the occasion like Americans, we will get through this stronger than before. Instead, it was this, it's not going to, don't worry, it's not going to be an issue. And then it was becoming an issue. Well, it's not going to be that bad of an issue. And then there was a blame game going around. What we needed was just clear, unbiased, and informed leadership. And there's another thing that leaders can do in a situation like this. If you're not the expert, get the hell away from the podium, right? One of the things that's interesting about what's happening in Team Rubicon right now is we've reconfigured our entire organization to be in this fight. And the pointy end of that spear, the leader, at the tip of that spear is not me, right? Because I'm not the right person to serve as the leader for our organization in this moment. So, about a week into this effort, after we went work from home, we appointed a COVID czar internally. And basically the entire organization now rolls under him. And that's because I knew that I wasn't the right person. I'm not the best emergency manager in our organization. So that meant it put me in a different role. So, sometimes push Fauci up to the microphone and get the hell out of the way. Yeah. It's kind of what I'm saying. Let the leader, let the experts speak.
Yeah. That's powerful. What about the Navy, man? I mean, this is a point now where it feels like, the troops and the politicians are on different sides, and I've been very critical of Modley. I think he should resign or be fired. The crew has now been thrust into this terrible situation where they're basically being asked to choose between the political leadership or their captain. Now, maybe hundreds of them have been have come up COVID positive, but at the very basic level, now you got an aircraft carrier full of guys and gals who are trying to do their job, and the Navy seems like it's ripped apart in a time of war. I mean, what's your take on that, Jake?
So it's complicated. I don't know all the details of Captain Crozier's email. I will say that, there are expectations of leaders in the military, and, copying 20 people onto that email was probably against protocol, right? Probably against protocol. I think it's probably safe to say that. And so I think Captain Crozier probably did that clear-eyed that he was probably going to get fired, right? Because, you know, the Navy's built on one thing, and that's accountability. So, you know, now I don't know if his earlier pleas were being ignored and he thought that this was the only, you know, the only avenue that he had to maintain the health and well-being of the sailors, which is his highest priority. I mean, that is his highest moral obligation is those sailors. So, you know, I kind of think that he knew what was going to happen. And so I don't know that firing him was the wrong move, right? Ignoring earlier pleas for assistance, if that had happened, that was the wrong move that led to it. But holding him accountable for that, I think it's extremely unfortunate. I don't know that I would say it's a shameful move. That being said, Mobley going on and giving this complete, you know, this ridiculous speech that is unbecoming his office, he needs to be held accountable too, right? Just like, you know, Crozier knew what he was getting himself into. He got held accountable for it because that's what the Navy does. Well, listen, if you're at the top and you're the acting Secretary of the Navy, you're going to be held accountable too by the Secretary of Defense. And I would, you know, I would support his removal on those grounds. I think, you know, it was inappropriate. It was juvenile for him to take a swipe at Captain Crozier. I think ultimately, you know, going back to what I said about Crozier earlier, they may have had no option but to remove him. That doesn't mean that they can't respect him on the way out for, again, doing what his highest moral obligation was, which was to take care of his sailors. So, you know, I think the whole thing is just, it's extremely unfortunate. I also suspect we're probably going to learn more in the coming days and weeks about what actually happened. And if there's really any criticism to lob, it's that this was all executed without an investigation. I mean, you had captains of warships that were driving them into other ships that didn't get relieved for 60 days pending an investigation. It's like, well, we know the ships collided. So
where sailors died, right? There were folks who died and they were still pending investigations. But the central point there that I think is probably outraged most Americans is that the crew felt like they needed help and they weren't getting it. And Crozier felt like he, you know, whether he did it the right way or not, he felt like he was a vessel for the vessel, right? He was going to push forward the calls of what they need. So I want to ask you, Jake, you know, you guys are at the tip of the spear more than any other nonprofit I know of in America, more than most, you know, organizations in America. What do you all need right now? For folks who are listening and want to help, what do you need?
We need inspired Americans who want to, you know, serve their neighbors in this time of need. We've got 120,000 volunteers. We're going to run out of volunteer hours in 30 days, you know, because that's just how big and broad this response is. So for any of you listeners out there feeling a little helpless about how, you know, what you can do, you know, Team Rubicon is considered an essential service under all of these shelter-in-place declarations. Volunteering with us can get you out of the home, into the field, working alongside under the right authorities, helping your neighbors in this moment when they need it. So, you know, let's get your listeners involved with Team Rubicon. Obviously, we need financial support. This is, you know, an unprecedented, you know, economic fallout that is coupling with the pandemic. To be frank, we don't know how that's going to impact us yet. We are raising some money relative to this COVID response, but, you know, we think that our end of year revenue pipeline could be significantly impacted by a 30% downturn in the stock market. So there's a lot of uncertainty there. But I think more than anything, you know, what do we need? We need America to start acting like America. So I imagine the people listening to your podcast, Paul, are proud Americans. You know, how do we through our just literal everyday interactions, everyday actions, just inspire the people around us to just be just a little bit better? Because that's what we need more than anything right now.
I love it. During that answer, 2 more sirens came by my house, just to frame it up for people, right? Like, that's how often they're coming through. And I think your call to action is an important one, because it's been one of my big criticisms of the president. He's not issuing a call to action. Team Rubicon needs volunteers. The VA needs 1,000 doctors to come out of retirement. New York needs healthcare workers. And it's what President Bush didn't do after 9/11. He didn't issue a call to action. And I really respect that you continue to do that. And for folks listening, we've talked about Team Rubicon before. They are the helpers, and this can get you out of the house. This can get you on the front line and get you involved, and you can be helping others. But Jake, you're also a guy with tremendous perspective. And I've asked this of a lot of other guests on the show. Would you ever run for office? A lot of people have asked you to run for office, either in Wisconsin or somewhere else. Would you ever run for office yourself?
I mean, I would never say never. I will say that it's not anything my wife would ever support. And, I think that I think I've had the rare opportunity to have inordinate impact for this country with what I'm doing. I think a lot of people think about getting into politics because they want to have more impact. And I just, I think I can impact my community, my country more in the seat that I'm in than, being one of 435 congressmen flinging mud back and forth across the aisle. It just doesn't make sense for me.
I appreciate that answer. You could be one of the 100 senators, or you could be, one of the members of the cabinet. So I hope you're on the short list for whoever is president, at this time next year. You're also a guy who knows how to maintain himself, maintain his people. You focus on your family. Your wife is even more impressive than you are. And I mean, for folks that don't know, it was an amazing situation for a long time where she is a meteorologist, right? And she's predicting storms on TV that you would respond to.
Yeah.
It was this amazing, you were this celebrity super couple.
Yeah,
I don't know if did they ever come up with like when they had Bennifer, did they ever come up with a name for combining you and Indra together?
Oh man, no, and they shouldn't start now.
But the two of you are a power couple, and you also are just good people. So I ask this of every guest as well. You've been through a lot of adversity, man. You've been through really hard stuff, and you still keep a great spirit and a contagious positivity. Jake Wood, what makes you happy?
Oh man, it's cliche, but it's got to be my daughter. 18 months old. The world is her oyster. She gets joy from the smallest things in life, and I look at a world that I've experienced the worst of this world. You have too. I've seen tragedy like most people can never imagine. Experienced it myself, and there's just got to be a better future for her. So, what keeps me motivated? It's building that future, not letting her down.
I love that. What else? Give me something else. Is there a music or working out or punching a heavy bag or something else weird about Jake Wood that we might not know that keeps you happy, man?
Well, going back to your first question, session IPAs and craft bourbon. A lot of my hobbies have fallen by the wayside as an entrepreneur. I think that's a common story. Man, it's kind of sad and depressing to even sit here and
you're also. I'll give you an out here. I mean, you're a social entrepreneur at the highest levels, and you have a little one, right? Yeah. Like, there's nothing that's more social entrepreneurial than having a kid.
Yeah, it's true.
And nothing that's more of an ass kicker. For a long time, I've said that there's only two things in life you only know if you experience them: combat and parenthood. And once you've done it, then you know it. And if you haven't done it, you really don't know. Now I put pandemics in there too. Yeah. Right? Like, if you haven't experienced a pandemic, you don't totally understand what that's like. But man, I want to. It's a good ending because I have a giving of the gifts. You've been an incredible leader for this country. I'm honored to know you. I'm honored to call you a friend. I've been so inspired and proud to see your rise from those early days, man. America's been rooting for you, but I also got to give you a giving the gifts. And I can't do it in person, so I'm going to do it virtually. So I got some gear coming for you from our friends at Oscar Mike. Okay. I know you like tight T-shirts, so I figured size small would be good, right?
Okay, yeah. All right. So you got a
T-shirt coming from Oscar Mike. I went easy on you, man. I went easy on you. We've also got Bravo Sierra is a sponsor of this show, so I think these will come in particularly handy for you.
Okay, all right.
Antibacterial body wipes. We'll
keep those at the desk so I don't have to shower.
Yeah, man. Since you haven't showered in a while, we can get you those. And they got shaving foam and deodorant and all kinds of other stuff that you probably don't use, but I know you'll use the antibacterial body wipes. I don't have them because I've run out of my stash. But if you had to pick between yellow, blue, or pink Peeps, and this will drop right before Easter, so this will be the Easter episode. If you had to pick yellow, blue, or pink Peeps, Jake Wood, what would you pick and why?
I'm trying to channel my wife, who's got the sweet tooth. I think it's yellow, man. I think that's like the classic, iconic Peeps. So I got to go yellow.
It's a good choice. You're channeling your wife well. Sarah Jessica Parker called them the OG of Peeps.
Okay.
And they are
exactly.
You're a branding master, dude.
There you go.
I have so much respect for the genius of the brand of Team Rubicon. And can you explain one thing quickly, Jake, for folks who don't know, where does the Rubicon part come from?
When we were crossing into Haiti from the Dominican Republic on that first mission, that border, we didn't know if we could actually get across the border. So thinking back to like the Rubicon River and Julius Caesar taking his army across the Rubicon and that being his point of no return, we kind of thought that phrase in our head, like this is our Rubicon as we approach the border. So we were only a small team of 8 people at the time. So it was just Team Rubicon, and it just stuck, never changed it.
It's a brilliant, brilliant name, and you're a brilliant guy. And I felt like you needed the big stuff. So I got, for folks who are listening, this is the gigantic bottle of Eagle Rare. We only gave it to one other guest, and it was to Rachel Maddow because she was such a but this felt like Jake Wood. It's gigantic. And
a 1 week supply.
Yeah. How
awesome.
tall are you? Are you 6'7"? How tall are you?
6'6".
You're 6'6". You're at 1.300 pounds. This is it has an eagle on it, right?
There you go, man.
Because of America. And I feel like I'm going to figure out a way to get this to you.
Love it, man.
And your crew.
Or you keep it and we do it on your balcony when all this dies down.
That's going to happen, man. We got the 50-pound bottle of champagne that we're also going to pop at the car club when this motherfucker's over, when we get to what I'm now calling VC Day, our Victory Over Corona Day, Coronavirus Day. But Jake Wood, you are an amazing, inspiring, and important American, the man of the moment. You're a hero, and I've told people before, but I want you to hear it as well. Leadership is not just about getting your mug on the camera. It's about a lot about sacrifice, and you have sacrificed so much for this country, for the veterans community, for so many people around the world. At a time when American leadership has been in question, I think for over a decade now, you have represented all of us in a truly spectacular way, and you've inspired me, and you've inspired millions, and you've created a movement. Chris Fussell said this a couple episodes ago. Your tombstone is stamped, man. You can rest easy every night knowing that the impact you've made has created a brush fire that will last long after the coronavirus and COVID-19 are gone, man. So as a friend and just as an American, I just want to thank you for all you've done and all you're going to do and all the seeds you planted all across this country and around the world.
Well, you are far too kind. I appreciate it, man. You were an early mentor to me, all the way back during the snowpocalypse, and I'm glad we've been able to grow up in the space together.
It's been an honor, and it wouldn't be fitting except that another siren is going by right now. And every time I hear that, and every time folks hear it, I want them to know that there are folks out there on the front lines who are the heroes, who are the helpers, and that includes heroes like Jake Wood. So, my friend, thank you. All the best to you and your crew out there every day. We're going to send all the reinforcements we can. And until then, my friend, stay frosty.
Awesome, man. Take care. Stay safe.